A story of respect. Wa wuhola. In Lakota, that means to be considerate or to hold in high esteem. The story of the Deer Woman. I have never seen Deer Woman myself, but I heard of a man who did when I was a boy. My grandmother knew that man. A young man, she said. He was always restless. He was never home. He didn't pay attention to his young wife. She said because he couldn't stop looking for Deer Woman. That could happen to me, she warned, if I wasn't careful. No one I know these days has seen the Deer Woman. Maybe it's because we, Lakota, are too modern and that we used to believe. That has been watered down, you might say. So, things change over time. Don't we know this? Maybe the Deer Woman knows we wouldn't respect that she is if she did show herself to someone in these times. That's interesting. Still, every time I went hunting, I thought I might see her. There was still some lonely country when I was a young man, before farms and ranches took over. Quiet river valleys, thick with oak and cottonwood, and wide open prairies where nothing moved but the wind. The kind of places I heard the Deer Woman liked to show herself to a lone hunter. Woman of the wilderness, a woman of the wildlands. It's one thing to think ahead about what to do, but when something does happen, it's never the way you imagined it would be. So I don't know what I would have done if Deer Woman had appeared to me. I like to think I would have done the right thing, that is, not given in to her. As in the story my grandmother used to tell me of a young man in the old days. I've forgotten the young man's name, so we'll just call him Koskakala, which means young man in Lakota. When he was a boy, Koskakala lived with his grandmother. His grandfather had died, so the boy's mother and father decided he should live with his grandmother. He didn't go all that far because her lodge was next to theirs. Quite convenient. The boy helped his grandmother by doing chores, but mainly taught him to cook, make clothes, and so on. The stories were what he liked best. Stories of how the people came into the world through the hole in the ground, of Tsanwi, the white buffalo calf maiden, who brought the pipe, Chanupa, which means pipe, sacred bundle in Lakota, and taught them many good things. Meow. And of the strong warriors in his family. Meow, meow. There were so many stories, he wondered if he could remember them all. One evening in the middle of a long winter, when the snow outside was deep and the winds howled, the old woman told her grandson the story of the Deer Woman. Grandson, she began, I have something to tell you. That's how some old people began their stories. Now, you are learning to be a hunter, she said. And to be a hunter is a good thing. A good hunter provides for his family so that there can be food to eat and good clothing to wear. I know you, grandson, will be a fine hunter. And I also know you will hunt alone many times. When you are alone hunting, there is something you must watch out for. Pay attention. Something besides the animals like the bear and the great cat who can hurt you. Something besides the enemies who come into our country now and then. Ooh. Sometimes the danger waiting out there is not just that your body might be injured or wounded. No. Sometimes the danger is for your spirit too, grandson. She continued. Men are sometimes wounded in battle, or they are hurt while hunting. Those wounds or injuries can heal. But your spirit is a different thing. If your spirit is hurt, sometimes it can never be well. Meaning it might not be something you can heal. Grandmother continued. My husband, your grandfather, told me of something that I heard of when I was a little girl. Something out there always waiting for hunters. He saw her, he told me, when he was a young man, before he became my husband. Maybe you will see her too, grandson. The dear woman waits out there, grandson. When you are a young man and a hunter, and you go out alone, she might appear to you. When you are tired and hungry, and very far from home, perhaps when your hunt has not been good, she will come to you. She is the most beautiful woman any man has seen. Those that have seen her say so. Her hair is shiny and hangs to her ankles. Her eyes are large and sparkle with a light that beckons, and her smile can turn the strongest man into a foolish boy. Her lodge is always pitched nearby, with a fire inside and soft robes. She will invite you in to drink tea with her and to rest. Do not go near her, grandson. Do not go near her lodge. Some men have had their spirits taken by her. Maybe they weren't pure of heart. But the grandmother is warning her grandson. I get it. Boom, boom. Under a perfect mind. When they woke up, they found themselves alone. The lodge was gone. She was gone. They had known her. They had lain with her. The most beautiful woman they had ever seen. And she was all they could think of. When this happens to a man, grandson, young or old, he forgets his family and goes looking for her, the dear woman. But he can never find her, no matter where he looks, no matter how far he travels, he can never find her. Such a man goes looking for the dear woman, he tells himself, because she is so beautiful that he must have her. But he is really looking for his spirit because she has taken it from him. A man who has lain with her is never the same. He is always restless. So, grandson, when you are a young man and you are hunting alone, far from home, and you come across the most beautiful woman you have ever seen, you must turn away. If you go with her, she will please you, and she will give you pleasure. But she will also take your spirit from you, and you will never have it back. It may be the most difficult thing you will ever do, but you must turn away from her. Koskakala did grow up to be a fine hunter. He was the best hunter in the village, as a matter of fact. He never failed to provide for his family and for those who were needy. It was said of him that when he left the village on the hunt, two things would be for certain. He would not return empty-handed, and he would be gone for many days. One autumn, soon after his grandmother had died, Koskakala made preparations for a hunt. He told his mother and father he would travel with 3 other hunters, and they would be gone longer than usual because it had been a dry summer, and the animals were closer to the big river, far to the north. The hunters reached the big river and set up their camp. They hunted the deep gullies and draws that cut down to the river banks. They were successful, but they had to use every skill they knew because the deer and elk were not so plentiful as they usually were, meaning probably not a good time to be murking them. But everybody's got to eat, right? The deer and elk seemed especially weary. Because the hunters were so far from home, they also had to dry the meat they had killed. As the days wore on, they grew tired and anxious to go home. Just before sundown one evening, Koskakala tracked a bull elk to learn the trail and animal used each day. Trekking. Yeah, that was my little input there. Tracking the tracks. Now, Koskakala was certain he could bring it down the next day if he waited in ambush at a good spot. As he headed back for the hunting camp, he smelled smoke from a fire and decided to see if enemies were about. Sneaking carefully down into a wide gully, he found a lone teepee, a lodge pitched in a grove of oak. It was a fine lodge, but a small one, and Koskakala wondered if others had come to the big river valleys to hunt. As he watched the lodge to see who might return to it, a woman came out and looked in his direction. He waited, but could see no one else. The woman waved and walked toward the plume thicket he was hiding in until she was very close. She spoke. "You must be very tired." Her voice was soft and soothing. Koskakala stepped from the thicket and a shudder went up his back. Standing before him was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. There were several beautiful women back in his small village, but their beauty next to this one was like a dim glow of a campfire, next to the brightness of the moon. She spoke. I have fire. It is warm in my lodge, and there are robes to rest on. Come. She said, and her eyes were beckoning and filled with promises a young man could not mistake. Koskakala knew who she was, of course, remembering grandmother's story. Standing a few steps from him was the deer woman. All the stories he had heard were true. She was so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off of her. Her hair was black as night and hung to her slender ankles. Her hands were small and delicate. Her eyes were deep, deep brown, and very large, with thick, long lashes. A man could get lost in them. A soft smile curved her full lips upward, and there was a slight scent of rose hips, as if her finely tanned dress had been rubbed with the flowers. I know you are tired, she went on, smiling. Come into my lodge and rest. Koskakala trembled. There was something more to this creature before him. He could feel it. He was afraid, but he was also tempted. He wanted to follow her, to take her into the lodge. She turned and walked away for a few steps, her slender body swaying, her long hair swinging with the fringe of her dress. She stopped and turned to Koskakala. You are strong, a fine young man, she murmured. I am looking for a young man such as you. I have been waiting for you. Come. Koskakala's legs seemed to have a mind of their own. Before he knew what was happening, he was walking toward the deer woman, his hand reaching for her outstretched. But a heartbeat before his hand touched hers, he stopped. You strong? No, he said, pulling his hand back. I will not go with you. She spoke. Yes, you must. Her voice soft and low, her eyes leaving no doubt as to her meaning. I need you. Koskakala was a strong young man, strong of body and of mind. It took all of that strength to turn away from the deer woman. It was the voice in his head that helped him. A voice that said, air quoting here, it may be, it's Grandma's voice, it may be the most difficult thing you will ever do, but you must turn away from her. No, Koskakala said again. I will not go with you. My grandmother said that I must turn away from you. I will not go with you. Leave me alone. Dear woman's beautiful face quickly twisted into an angry sneer. She stamped her feet and snorted. Her mouth moved, but she could not speak. A cold wind suddenly sprang up, scattering the leaves in the gully. Koskakala was afraid, and he turned to run. Leaves rattled all around him, and he heard a whistling snort, the sound the deer made when they were alarmed. Looking back, he saw a deer standing where the deer woman had been. It was a female blacktail with a dark stripe across its face. He had never seen such a black stripe across the face of any deer. Koskakala noticed something else. The deer woman's lodge was gone. The deer lowered its head to charge. Ooh, dang. Koskakala put an arrow on his bow to his string, raised the bow to take aim. The deer spun and disappeared into a line of sumac. Ooh, melasma larina. Sumac. They think that's the scientific name for it, but it's irrelevant. Never again in his life would Koskakala see such a deer, although he would always be on the lookout for it, for her. He never saw the deer woman again for as long as he lived. Koskakala returned to the hunting camp and told his companions what had happened. He told them that he had seen Deer Woman. They believed him because there was something different about him. There was a look of strength in his eyes. Wisdom applied, yos. He spoke. We must build a sweat lodge and pray. Wisdom, yo. He told them. So they did. A low, round lodge made of willow and covered with deer and elk hides. That night, they heated stones and made a sweat to purify themselves and to pray for good things to happen. In the days that followed, their hunting was good. It was very good. Soon they had plenty of meat to take home. Respect. In time, Koskakala courted a young woman from another village, and he won her love. I love how they say he won her love. It's so beautiful. They married and had a son and a daughter. Over the years, not only was he the finest, most skillful hunter to come along in many a generation, but he was also a stalwart warrior and a leader of men. Men were willing to follow him on the warpath or on the hunt because he had a calm manner and strength of spirit. And when he was an older man, he took his place on the council of old men, and there he was known for his wisdom and good advice. The deer woman couldn't fool Koskakala because of one thing: respect. Koskakala loved and respected his grandmother, and because he did, he remembered her words during an awful moment, when the deer woman almost took him. If he had not respected his grandmother, he would not remember what she had told him. Perhaps the deer woman doesn't appear to lone hunters anymore. Or perhaps she does in other ways. Yes, times have changed for us. So maybe she's changed her ways. So too, and comes after our spirits in other ways. I resonate with that. Seen some strange things on this earth walk. I'm sure some of you can relate. We can relate. You're never too old to remember the things your grandmother taught you. It's never too late to respect the ways of our elders. It's never too late to remember what grandmother said. Remember, respect. a hoe.